Welcome back, everybody. So wonderful to see you all here again tonight. We are, as we talked about on Saturday, we really want all of you to have information and understanding about all the work that's done at Tubman, all the different services. And so tonight we're really going to take some time to focus on our shelter services for people experiencing family violence. And so many people have heard of our shelter services, but you're all going to hear more about kind of our approach, our philosophies. Then we're going to spend some time at the end talking about safety planning. So I am really excited to be able to introduce our two speakers tonight. They are Brooklyn Deutsch, who was at our training on Saturday. So you've met Brooklyn, so she's here tonight. I am not seeing you, Brooklyn. Are you on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
There you are. Okay. It's just that I can only see part of you, part of y'all. And then Carla Scovold. Carla, you here?
I am here.
Hey, Carla. So, these two are incredible coworkers of mine that know so much and have so many years of experience that they're going to share all about with tonight. So, I'm just going to let you two introduce yourselves and take it from there.
Thanks, Joni.
You got it.
As Joni mentioned, my name is Carla Scovold. I did once upon a time work in the shelter. I no longer work in the shelter. My role is sustainability services, and you'll get information about the programs I work in on your last night of training. But I'm here to also support the conversation around our philosophy, our approach to working with people with violence, and safety planning. I just want to do a little bit of reminder that you are welcome to ask questions throughout our presentation. You can do that by throwing information into the chat or coming off mute. We have some designated areas to just stop and ask for questions. So we'll for sure be creating time for questions. If you throw something in the chat and we don't get it to it right away, we will for sure be stopping at various points to do that. All right. Brooklyn, are you ready?
Yeah, it's nice to see you all again. I'm Brooklyn. I'm getting sick too, so sorry if my voice is a little hoarse. But I'm Brooklyn. I'm the shelter program and operations manager. I started out at Tubman in 2020 as an intern. And I came back in 2021 as a case manager, and then I'm just new to this role, well, newish, year and a half or so. So I'm happy to see you all again and to talk more about the shelter program. So kind of to jump into the shelter. So where you guys all were on Saturday, that is our shelter location in Maplewood. And that's the only shelter location. We used to have a shelter location in Minneapolis, but we sold that building and merged everything over to Maplewood in 2018. Um, Kind of when George Floyd was happening, I believe that was the year, 2018 or 2020. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carla. Um, and then we're able to shelter 65 people. Two-third of that 65 are parenting clients. So a lot of that 65 are 40 of that is kids. So the shelter is usually a lot of kids running around. So yeah, in that picture, we call that like the courtyard. So we have like a lot of events out there during the summertime, like Juneteenth, we do a lot of events. National Night Out will sometimes have our event out there, so we do utilize that space a lot for families. They also will eat like their meals out there because, as you can see, there's picnic tables out there. There's also a playground out there too, and a basketball court as well. In our shelter, we serve all people of all ages and genders. Our shelter is co-ed and it is community living, so men, women, They don't live on separate floors. It's all co-ed living. Um, Shared spaces that they share is like the kitchen, like the kitchenette, the bathrooms, computer lab. Um, but we'll talk more about like what the room setup kind of looks like later on. We didn't used to serve men all the time. We began serving men in 2016, which was a big change for us, but we wanted to do that to ensure that anyone who is experiencing domestic violence can experience safety. And what the shelter team kind of looks like and is made up of. We have a team of advocates that are there on site 24/7. They're kind of the ones who provide like the immediate supports to the families that we serve. So we have something that's called like the welcome desk. So if we have a family that's coming down, they can get like any immediate supplies, baby wipes, diapers, laundry soap. They're the ones who are answering the 24/7 crisis line. So if we have someone seeking shelter, they're taking the intervention phone call. So if a police is calling, a police department's calling in to report domestic violence, they're the ones taking those calls. We have case managers on each floor as well. Each client is assigned a case manager when they first come in, and that's kind of like their point person to go over goal planning, safety planning, which we'll talk more about towards the end of this training. We also have a team of 3 youth and family workers, and they're kind of, again, the point person um, to do more of like that parenting support for the families who are in shelter. So if the family needs help getting their kids connected to a school in the area or just need parenting advice on how can I make a bedtime routine for my child, or I'm experiencing this challenging tantrums at school or something. I need additional support for this, or I need to find daycares in the area. Or I need help filling out the child care assistance form. The youth and family workers are someone they can go to. They also do a lot of like programming for the families in shelter to keep the kids busy, especially during the winter time. So there's lots of amazing programs that they do. We also have a team of managers, including myself. We have a lead shelter manager and a community shelter manager, and then we also have a shelter director, and then all the wonderful interns and volunteers like yourself. Um, so yeah, and please let me know if you have any questions, chime in, drop them in the chat, or take yourself out off of mute. So kind of to talk about what the rooms look like. So here's an example. It's kind of like dorm style, but each room is set up a little bit different to accommodate the family size. So we have some rooms that might be like a twin and a twin over a full, or like 2 twins over twins. So we have different setups. Each family do have like their own rooms. They get their own key to their room. That's kind of like a hotel key. So they only have access to their room. We give them basic like a shower caddy when they first come in, so they get like their basic supplies. Um, they can bring what they want to their room and kind of decorate their room how they want to make it more cozy. Um, And we do room checks weekly, kind of just to make sure like everything is safe and like things are working correctly and like there's no like maintenance to be. If there's no maintenance, we want to make sure because sometimes we have broken windows or beds, and sometimes the clients might be scared to like tell us. So we just want to make sure that everything is safe. So case managers are the ones who kind of conduct like the room checks weekly. We also want to make sure that they don't have things that aren't allowed in the rooms. We don't check their belongings when they first come into shelter, but there are things that they're not supposed to have while they're in our program. Things like that include drugs, alcohol, candles, and anything that could be like a safety hazard while they're there. And if we do find items like that during safety checks or room checks, we just take them away and then we'll give it back to them once they leave our program. I'm ready for the next slide. A little bit about the community spaces and like the shared spaces. The picture on the right is kind of what a kitchenette looks like. Each floor has a kitchenette, so clients can eat their food out here. We do have a cafeteria as well where the main lunch and dinner is served. We have lunch and dinner catered in, but families are welcome to go to the store and buy their own food. We do have store runs weekly. We actually have like volunteer drivers who will take the clients to the stores weekly, and they can sign up. And so there's a fridge and freezer where they can store their favorite snacks. And like if they have kids, they have to like pack lunches and stuff so they can store their food there. But they can't do any cooking, so there's no like stove or anything like that. No air fryers either. Um, so that's the kitchenette, and there's a microwave as well too. And then on the left, there's the kid space or the kid room. Um, and so if we have a client coming in who's doing, let's say, an intake, staff might utilize this space to take the kids here to play. The youth and family workers also utilize this space a lot. And the interns utilize this space a lot too. Um, some of the other shared spaces would include like the computer rooms. There's a computer room on each floor. There's a laundry room as well on each floor so clients can wash their clothes. And again, there's a shared bathroom and shower room. Am I missing anything, Carla? I feel like I'm missing something. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about community spaces?
To introduce one of our newest programs that we have, we are going to take a little poll, and that question is approximately what percentage of domestic violence survivors delayed leaving because of fear of their pet safety? So have you guys participate by selecting the answer that you think it may be? How are we doing?
Who's the sweet pup in the slide, Carla?
That is my little girl, Lola. She's been with us for about a year, and she's just the sweetest little baby in the world. Um, so answers are, looks like majority, 40% answered 50%, and then about close to 30% for 25 and 75%. And many of you are correct. It is nearly 50% of people delay leaving an abusive situation because they fear for their pet safety.
So as Carla mentioned, we see that there is a big need for this. So we're excited that we're opening a pet shelter. Um, and the pet shelter will be able to house 8 dogs and 8 cats. Families coming in, they're able to have 2 pets per family. Um, so yeah, so if like someone's calling in and we have like a phone screening process that the advocates would go through during that phone screening process, they'll ask them questions like, okay, do you also have pets that are seeking safety as well? Um, and if the pets meet like the criteria and if the clients are comfortable with the pets being neutered and whatnot, um, we can accept them into shelter as well. The shelter isn't up and running right now. So right now, in the meantime, we are part of the Minnesota Pet Coalition. So there is an option for the pets to be placed in like a foster home. Um, so we'll accept the family in. They were placed on like a separate floor for right now, and then we hold like another bed up in shelter for them. and then it takes about like 24 to 48 hours to get for like to find like a foster family for the pets to go to. Um, and then during the time, like when they are in a foster family, they did updates that their case manager will share with the client, and then they get reunited at the end. Um, but if a client decides 3 days in that being separated from their pet, which we have seen because it is hard, they sometimes will leave the program earlier on. So we are excited to have the option where we have the pet shelter where clients will be able to stay in the program, work on their goals, and also be with their pets. So,
Should we have Zoe introduce herself real quick?
oh yes, are we here? Yes.
Zoe, would you like to say hello? We've been waiting for you to arrive. Zoe is our new Harriet's Haven for Pets manager.
Yes, yes. Very happy to be here and happy to have had arrived and excited to kind of get the protocols and programming and start getting stuff in place to be able to offer this. So, yeah, super excited to be here.
When are you going to be open, Zoe?
No,
Here's your, it's your second
I'm
day
not
here. Would
I'm
you think?
not sure. It was my second day today, and I'm kind of going through just general background education and kind of immersing into various roles in the shelter and trying to get an idea of how everything runs and what everybody's doing. So, um, as soon as possible, but yeah.
We're glad you can be here, and there's a few volunteers in the room that are happy to see you as well.
Awesome.
New
Nice to meet
volunteers.
everybody.
All right. Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah, of course.
and moving into the services that we offer our shelter clients. So, as I mentioned earlier before, when a family comes in, they're assigned a case manager. And so each case manager, they'll meet with the client, complete the intake, and kind of identify um, what the client's goals are while in the program. Every client's goal is going to be finding housing. Um, and then, they're going to be doing ongoing safety planning too while they're in the program. And we'll talk more about what that's going to look like later on. Um, case managers are only available during business hours. Um, but because we are 24/7, that's where we have our advocates step in. And if families need any additional immediate support, they can provide that immediate support and also provide safety planning and additional resources if needed for the families. Um, Clients can stay in the program anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Um, so yeah, and the pitch right on to the right is our what we call the welcome desk. So that's where our advocates kind of work out of. We also offer support and education groups. These groups cover topics like healthy relationships, um, sorry, and other support groups that we offer on site. We also have like a therapist that comes on sites on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So they can also like sign up at the welcome desk if they want to see them. Um, if they don't want to see our therapist, we also offer like resources out in the community. But we try to connect our clients to Tubman services as much as possible, but also provide them options without in the community too, just to give them options. But they don't have to use our Tubman services too. It's nice to be able to provide them with different resources. So what it kind of looks like for someone to like get into shelter, as I mentioned before, advocates are the ones kind of answering that 24/7 crisis line. Sorry. So if someone's like calling in and they're saying, "Hey, I'm seeking shelter due to domestic violence," the advocates will kind of go through the screening process of what that looks like, and if they meet the criteria, we will accept and have the space. We will accept them into shelter. Another way that could look like is we sometimes have walk-ins too. So we could have someone walk to our Maplewood location. We could have someone walk to our North Star location as well, and that's in the Maplewood Mall. And sometimes if they go to the Maplewood Mall, let's say we might have like a staff person say like, "Hey, we've had someone walk in here and they're seeking shelter. Do you have space?" And we might get like a referral that way. We also might have a police officer call and say, "Hey, we just had someone experience got assaulted tonight, and their abuser still have access to come into their home. We weren't able to arrest them. Can they come and stay at the shelter until we did an OFP or figure something out?" So that might also be another way someone can get into shelter. Um, am I missing anything, Carla?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. Any questions? Quiet group. Um, and then the shelter client advisory. So this is kind of made up of, it used to be made up of just past clients, but now we opened it up to past and current clients. Um, so we meet monthly, and kind of just getting feedback of what we can improve in the program. Some of the past things that they have done is they've helped pick out artwork for the spaces to kind of help warm up the spaces. So that was exciting because we didn't have a lot of artwork in the shelter. Um, they also helped like create the handbook in the past too. Um, and we're looking forward to having them be more involved this coming year too. They attend a lot of our events too. Like if we have events on Juneteenth, National Night Out, they do attend and help volunteer a lot. So they're very engaged and giving feedback. So it's been nice having current clients on the board this time. Because we used to be small and mighty, but now we have about 10 clients on the board now. So that's kind of been nice. Any question, comments, thoughts?
We'll give you just a minute, just in case somebody might be typing into the chat a question. We are at a place where we're wrapping up our conversation about shelter services. And we'll be transitioning to our next section. So this would be a good ch chance to, in case there's anything that you are wondering about as far as shelter or shelter services or accessing shelter. Thank you.
That's a good question. So we have something called Day One that shows open shelter bed space for all shelters. So we'll have advocates look at that to see what's open. And we try to do like a warm handoff. So we try to offer like, "Hey, do you want us to call with you?" Um, so we'll do that. And sometimes they don't want us to do that, and we'll just give people a whole bunch of different numbers to call. And we also do like drop-in. I think we give out a lot of like drop-in center numbers too. And for winter time right now, like warming centers as well. That was a good question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I disconnected for a while accidentally. And I missed it. I may have missed some information, but I was just wondering when you were talking about the kids and daycare and such, what age range of children are there? Is it all the way up to high school?
Yeah, all ages and yeah, all ages. I think we see a lot of younger kids in shelter though, I would say.
Okay. Um, do they switch schools? Because it sounds like they must be coming from a number of different places.
Not really, to be honest. We try to have them because I forgot what, maybe Carla, you know there's a law or
There's,
something that for the
yeah.
transportation, yeah.
There's a law called McKinney-Vento, which actually requires schools to transport kids to the school that they're originally enrolled in. So if I went to shelter and I had a child attending in Minneapolis and I went to Maplewood, the Minneapolis School District is required to transport that child to school because we know oftentimes kids do better if they're not jumping from school to school to school.
Okay.
Um, and that also might change if a parent felt like the Minneapolis school was no longer safe. Like maybe my partner knew that my child was going to school there. I didn't feel like it was safe, but kind of the general hope is that the kid doesn't have to experience that disruption of starting a new school, making new friends.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. Um, and do the parents go to their jobs then daily?
So that's usually part of goal planning, um, is seeking employment or increasing their income. Another program that Tubman offers is called Jeff. And Carla could maybe chime in and speak more about what that is because that's also a great resource too.
JEF stands for Jobs Education and Finance, and we have a great volunteer actually who provides career services. So resume writing, career exploration, looking at getting into job training programs. She'll meet with people who are interested, in addition to the case management that staff provide, but she kind of specializes in that, as well as we often have financial volunteers that will help address credit concerns and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. Can you please leave that in the chat?
Jobs education and finance information. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we do have like a shelter newsletter that we do monthly, the event planning committee. So we try to include Tubman events and also like things that are happening in the community. So like if there's a job fair, we do try to include things like that too for our clients.
Thanks.
Yeah, good questions. And someone said districts will send out vans to pick up the kids up early. Yep. Um, Someone asked, does Tubman provide transportations for families seeking shelter? So yeah, we do. We're able to lift people into shelter if they're accepted. And we do provide transportation support while they're in the program. What kind of assessment questions are asked before admitting someone to the shelter? Like what the screening process looks like. Um, I should have had that with me. I think it's kind of just like asking like why are you seeking shelter? It's kind of just general question what your name is. We want to make sure you haven't recently been into shelter because I think you can't be in the program. If you've been here 4 months ago, we can't accept you back in. And kind of just hear more about why you're seeking shelter because we want to make sure that the program is a good fit. Um, because if we're hearing if it's more mental health or if you need maybe more like PCA support, we want to make sure that we're accepting you into the right program and meeting your needs because we don't want to accept you here and then find out that you might have higher needs that we could help you with, and then we have to find something else for you. Does that kind of help answer that question?
Awesome. All good questions. I might have us kind of move to the next section, but we're going to have more opportunities for questions, and so um, hold on to them. Um, we'll have more time in a little bit to talk about shelter if any more questions kind of come to mind. I'm going to talk to you about Tubman's evolving approach to working with people impacted by domestic violence. Um, so Tubman may have a slightly different approach to working with people impacted by domestic violence. And what this slide is going to talk a little bit about is a comparison between a conventional model. Some people might refer to that as the Duluth model, if you're familiar with the Duluth model, and the ecological model, which is what we use. And there's some ways that there's very similar um, pieces to how we approach working with people impacted, and then some things that might be slightly different. Um, the conventional model or the Duluth model was a really kind of a great approach at the time that it was developed. It really gave us a foundation of understanding of what happens in domestic violence and abusive relationships. We started using the ecological model, gosh, over 20 years ago. Um, we started to make some changes in how we looked at and viewed domestic violence. The conventional model has some ideas around like how we view victims and perpetrators. And there's been thoughts in the past that once somebody's a perpetrator, they're always going to be a perpetrator. And the same with victims, that either one person is one or the other. Under the ecological model, we know that all people have the capacity to grow and change, so that they're not always going to be somebody who uses violence or experiences violence. Um, and they're able to grow and evolve into emotional, competent human beings. Some might believe that perpetrators have a problem with power and control, and victims don't have power and control in a relationship. And under the ecological model, we believe that everybody has the ability to utilize power and control. And we're going to talk about that in more detail a little bit later in the training. But we all use power and control in relationships, and it's about having a healthy balance of power and control. Um, a lot of programs in the past have really um, used shaming techniques when working with perpetrators, that they need to admit to the behavior that they're using. They need to admit that what they've been doing is wrong. And on the flip side of that, um, use programs will rescue victims. So tell them that they have to leave relationships, tell them that they have to come in to shelter, um, and that they're unable to rescue themselves. Where we believe that self-growth and developing resilience and holding ourselves to a higher standard is really what helps us get from a difficult place to being able to grow and have healthier relationships. Um, that each individual is able to do that work themselves. And then others believe that perpetrators, when they talk about pain, they're deflecting from their actions. Um, and if they were able to connect to that emotion, they would have never perpetrated that violence in the first place. Where if victims talk about their pain, they're actually doing a lot of work and they're healing and they're processing. Um, sometimes what happens is that people can get into a cycle of processing and not necessarily doing the growth work. But again, we believe that all people have the ability to connect with their feelings and strive to balance and to regulate their emotions through self-control and through empowerment. Um, so that's kind of a brief look at the conventional model and the ecological model and how we've used that. All right. I mentioned that we kind of created a change in how we were accessing our services or how we were providing our services a little over 20 years ago. So it's been a little bit of a while. And we did that by reaching out to people that we were currently serving or that we had served recently and asked them what it was that they most needed, what they were most looking for from Tubman when they reached out for support. And there were a couple of things that really stood out to us about the answers that we received. Um, One was there was an overwhelming amount of people that were saying they wanted to stay in their relationships. They just wanted the abuse to stop. And that they felt financially distressed, that when they thought about leaving a relationship, the financial concerns about being able to provide for themselves, in addition to be able to provide for their children's needs, was one of the biggest barriers to leaving. So when we received those specific things we knew that we needed to develop some of our services to meet those needs. So that was a big point in when we started to provide services for men and developed our counseling program that work with people who use violence to help them learn different ways to regulate their anxiety and their emotions, as well as developing services around the jobs, education, and finance that we really needed to spend some time helping people figure out how to navigate um, being the main financial provider or how to address concerns with credit or, those pieces that people were really concerned about. So we responded by changing the services that we were providing. We also knew that it was important that we provide trauma-informed services, which today trauma-informed is a term that we use. It's a pretty common term that we hear. But 20, 25 years ago, it was not something that we were hearing much from service providers. And so we knew that we needed to really understand trauma and how to work with people who had been impacted by trauma. We needed to provide strength-based services. So that's really seeing the strengths that people have and not just focusing on their needs, their weaknesses, the problems that they brought in. And we needed to have a collaborative approach and person-centered. So we can't do this work by ourselves. We need to be able to connect with partners and do work together within the community, as well as having the participants that we serve really be the drivers of what they want to work on. And we are the passengers, we are the ones providing support helping to direct them by providing resources and information, but they really are the ones choosing what they want to work on. So essentially, we need to meet people where they're at. If somebody contacts us and they're just looking for information and support, then that's what we provide. If somebody's ready to really to leave their relationship, we want to be available to be there for support. If somebody's looking for ways to stay in their relationship, we want to make sure that we can support them at that place too. So really listening to what people want. So let's talk a little bit about the ecological approach to domestic violence. We believe that everybody has the ability to grow and change their behavior, not just people who've experienced violence, but also those who perpetrate violence. We understand that safety is key. Um, Part of the reason why we're talking about safety planning tonight is because talking about safety is a key service that we provide. We know that it needs to be addressed, and then we need to reassess safety as we work with somebody. It's not a one-time conversation. That everybody has power and control, and that if violence is a learned behavior, it can also be unlearned. So, ecological services. Um, Essentially, ecological services means that all things are interrelated. Everything and everyone is comprised of parts, and the parts are a part of a larger system. So when somebody comes to us seeking support, they're not just bringing the concern that they have, that might be safety or that they need to flee violence. It might be mental health services, it might be a variety of different things. That's not just who that person is. They're much wider and there's much more to who they are. So if we break down the ecological perspective a little bit more, it's the belief that everything is related to everything else. So if everything is interrelated, everything is composed of parts, and then those parts create a larger system. We benefit from recognizing how complex humans are and how complex their interactions are, particularly when we work with people in close relationships. This perspective can guide us on how we do our work, how we offer empathy and support, and not just focus on the problems. It helps us understand that when people use their strengths and resources to improve their lives, that they can get much farther than when we just focus on the things that are wrong. When working with people who have been impacted by violence, we want to find the strengths and solid pieces of them and help them build on that by using empowerment. We're going to look a little bit at some definitions of violence. These are in no way legal definitions of violence, but addresses many of the types of violence that we serve at Tubman. We are largely thought of as an agency that addresses domestic violence, but we also, and throughout the time that I've been working at Tubman, which has been a really long time, we have always addressed exploitation and trafficking, helping people flee multiple forms of violent relationships, not just intimate partner relationships. So I think we are at another poll question. The question is, what type of violence do 99% of victims of survivors of domestic violence experience. So kind of give it your best guess. All right. So the answers are 4% physical, 60% emotional, 32% psychological, and then 4% financial. Great answers. We are going to run through um, some of the information, kind of just talk a little bit about those 6 types of abuse. And in our answers, or in our discussion, we're going to come up with the answer for that poll question. So let's start with physical. Physical abuse can take many different forms, and it's oftentimes the most common form of abuse that we're familiar with because we typically see it on TV and movies. It typically is what people recognize. There's many times physical, visual signs that domestic violence is happening. Some examples of physical abuse might be strangulation or choking, pushing or shoving, pulling hair, might be using dangerous weapons, but forcing somebody to ride in a car that's being driven dangerously, depriving somebody of food, shelter, clothing, holding them down, um, injuries that might include broken bones or internal injuries, burns, are just some examples of physical abuse.
The next one is emotional abuse. That's anything that hurts the heart. Some examples of that could be threatening you're going to leave, threatening to take the children or harm themselves if you don't listen, name calling, talking poorly about partners, family members, and friends. And if you think of any other examples, feel free to throw it in the chat too.
Next, we're going to talk about psychological abuse. Um, a lot of times people will connect emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And while emotional abuse is what people feel, psychological abuse is what people think. So one of the terms that we talk about a lot lately is gaslighting, convincing you that you're crazy or incompetent, insisting that things happen differently than how you remember. Or when somebody who's abusive might hit you and then tell their partner that it's their fault that that happened. Isolation can be a form of psychological abuse. Accusing you of having an affair when you're not, refusing to talk to you directly, threatening to hurt themselves or your kids or your pets, um, threatening to expose secrets. Like if you identify within the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, threatening to call your employer and out you. Or one that's probably very common right now is threatening to call INS, or Child Protection Services.
And then sexual abuse is anything that hurts the sexual self. Some examples of that can be forced sexual acts, rape, unwanted touch, refusing to use protection, not allowing you to be on birth control, forcing someone to have sex, selling your nudes to someone too. or some
The next
information.
one we're going to talk about is financial abuse, and this is actually the answer to our poll question. Financial abuse is experienced by 99% of people who experience abuse. I mean, really, what could we say? It's probably experienced by 100% of people who experience abuse. And financial abuse is also often the most unrecognized form of abuse. A lot of times when we talk up to people and we talk about what their experiences have been, um, they don't tend to mention these things. But when we ask questions, it just didn't occur to them. It might be controlling or spending your money, um, putting bills in your name without your knowledge and then not paying them, ruining your credit history, um, making you turn over paychecks or passwords to accounts or credit cards, convincing you to open credit because maybe their credit isn't good enough, and then again, they don't pay it, or maybe take out a car loan and then not paying it. Interfering with your job. So putting you in a situation where you might get fired or you're forced to quit your job. Um, Limiting you to go to school to get a job that might pay you more money once you're done. Um, Forcing you to ask for money. Gambling. And then one that I commonly see is not paying child support.
And then the last one is technology abuse. Some examples of this could be forcing you to share your location, installing spyware on your devices, harassment through technology, monitoring your social media, asking for your password to everything, asking to go through your phone, limiting your access to things, um, also blocking you as a form of punishment too, for a few examples.
So we are about halfway through our training, and I know that this is some dense information. What I'm going to recommend is that we take a quick, maybe 5-minute break, because we have more information on domestic violence to talk about as well as safety planning. So get up, run to the bathroom, stretch, turn around, do what you need to do to kind of revive your energy a little bit. And we'll be back just at about 7 o'clock. Looks like about awesome. Thank you. So, um, thank you. Moving on. So we're gonna ask a question. Why might somebody stay in an unhealthy relationship? So I'm gonna ask for ideas from you guys. Either take yourself off mute, share an idea, or throw something in the chat. My request is you don't put a bunch of ideas all together because it's hard for me to read through the chat when it's thick with ideas. So just kind of throw one idea, two ideas in. Fear of not having anywhere to go. Yes, absolutely. A lot of times people don't know what services are available. Fear of being alone, maybe not feeling like you'll find somebody else that will love you. Children are a really big reason why we choose not to leave a relationship for multiple reasons, right? Like it can be wanting to have two parents in the household. It can be if I leave, might I lose my children in a custody battle or um, having to share that financially that we've talked about before. Um, I had a client years ago now who was fighting for her children in court. She had to take a second mortgage out on her parents' home to pay for the court fees. It was just incredibly expensive. Um, the shame of knowing that you've been in an abusive relationship and just kind of processing what that meant. A lot of times people don't realize actually how common it is and that there would be understanding. Finances, fear for their life, 100%. We know that the most dangerous time to be in an abusive relationship is when you're leaving an abusive relationship. And unfortunately, we lose way too many lives. Um, Partner threatening, believing that the person will change. Absolutely. And just kind of your belief in yourself that you can be there for them, help them through that change. A lot of times people feel like they're the only one that understands their relationship or their partner and what they've been through in life, and I'm just gonna stand by their side and support them. Fear of retaliation, fear of being found. Trauma bonding. Yes, 100%. Um, Not wanting to lose their things. So a lot of times people leave and have to leave a bunch of stuff behind.
Can you explain
Uh,
trauma bonding, Carla, for those that haven't heard that?
I can try. Um, Trauma bonding is often when you're, and if somebody else wants to throw in an explanation as well. But when you're often in a relationship, um, with somebody else who's been impacted by trauma, there's often um, just kind of a level of connection and that it's really difficult to kind of move through that trauma. Um, there's often life experiences that um, kind of pull you together. It often explains or kind of speaks to why it's really difficult when you know kind of consciously I'm in a really bad situation, but you still feel such a tie to being together with that person. It can really kind of explain a lot of the complexity. I encourage you to look it up too if you have curiosity, because I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but for a lot of the people that I work with, it kind of gives an answer as to why it's so hard sometimes to walk away from those relationships. What am I missing, Brooklyn? What haven't I touched base on?
I think you, I think you touched base on everything. Mhm.
Yeah. I see one about growing up in a similar situation. And I know a lot of times I worked with somebody in the past who grew up in an abusive household, and then they ended up in an abusive relationship, and that could really relate to just the relationship dynamics that they experienced as a child, and how familiar that felt. And it just felt like it felt normal, where being in a healthy relationship felt there was a lot of anxiety. It just didn't feel right. And can be really difficult. And she talked about it as she felt like healthy relationships were wrong, and it really took years of therapy to kind of be able to work through that. Um, yeah, the a partner might be the person who financially has all the accounts, the money, owns all the possessions. A couple of the things that I didn't see listed was sometimes within religious communities, cultural communities. There's beliefs of staying in a relationship. I worked with somebody who talked about within her community that the clan was kind of the most important, and then the family, and then your marriage, and then you were the least important, kind of in the hierarchy. And so the expectation was that you would always stay with your community, with your family. Um, Also I touched on it a little bit, but when you're in a community such as the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, um, and many other identities, that a lot of times you don't know what services are available for you. You don't know if you'd be welcome in a shelter. You might not feel comfortable calling the police. So many reasons why you might not leave. And then if you're somebody who identifies as having a disability and you're dependent on somebody to care for you, and that person is abusive, or if you're somebody who's an elder and you're dependent on maybe a child or a caregiver to care for you, um, the difficulties that that can create if you need to flee. So great participation, great ideas. If you think of other ones too, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat because I'm sure that there's still many that we haven't touched on. See where we're at. All right, so as promised, we're going to talk a little bit about power and control. Um, Power and control, as you can see on the slide, definition is power, the ability to influence, control, the ability to shape, block, or limit influence. This came out of the Webster Dictionary. This wasn't a definition that Tubman created. Um, a lot of times within the domestic violence community, power and control is discussed as one long word. Like power and control is one thing, as instead of like two separate concepts that are really deeply related and interconnected, um, not just one long word. Um, and power and control is a part of every relationship. For example, you and I right now are using power and control. I am using my ability to influence, and you right now have the ability to block, shape, and limit influence. And hopefully, our interaction right now is not abusive in any kind of way. Power and control is present in every relationship, even more present in close relationships because we're more invested in those people than we are in just kind of the random stranger we might meet at a bus stop or in the convenience store or wherever we might be. When we think about power and control go hand in hand, almost like two sides of the same coin. One whole coin, but they're separate pieces. Um, when we think about power separately, um, in kind of the most absence of power, is when you have no recognition or influence on the world. Somebody who feels like um, they're unable to get their needs met. Maybe it's a child who really was neglected, and just never created bonds with adults, were never able to get needs met. Kind of that feeling of it doesn't matter what I need, I won't be able to create any kind of influence. So when we have low power, we feel like we have minimal impact on the world. We tend to defer to other people to make decisions for us. We're unlikely to speak up for ourselves. When you think of kind of a continuum, and one end being a low power, the middle is really where we want to be balanced. And it's where we feel empowered. We feel like we have a voice. We feel like we can create change in our world. And we feel like we can do that in healthy ways. And then on the other end of the continuum is overpowering. And in an extreme sense, overpower might look like violation. It might look like exploitation. It might look like abuse. It might look like violence. When we're overpowered, we tend to use our power in abusive ways, whether it is to get what we want, to influence somebody. Um, Being overpowered is what we recognize as abusive power, somebody who does not know how to regulate that influence. On the other end, the other continuum or the other side of the coin is control. And control is a regulating process. We regulate the influence that we have on people or ourselves. It's a natural process of learning more control, more regulation, and hopefully as we get older, we get better at that. When we have an absence of control, that means we have no boundaries. We don't recognize the boundaries that we have for ourselves, for other people. We tend to blow over those boundaries, which is why when people have a really hard time with control, who the people that tend to come into their lives are police officers, probation officers, people who have systems to help create control. On the other end of it, when you have high levels of control, um, kind of when you're in the middle, we have the ability to have boundaries but not blow over people's boundaries. And then high levels of control is not allowing any influence into our lives, having almost a wall up, where we just don't let any information in. Our way of regulating things is by shutting people out. Um, High levels of control in abusive ways can also look like deactivation, where you want to completely shut somebody down, stop them from having influence. And you may say things like, you're not worthy of paying attention to. You might give them the silent treatment. So you just aren't letting them, their words or anything have any impact. Um, you're denying somebody's ability to have influence. You shut them down. You really break up somebody's confidence. So when we're talking about domestic violence, yes, domestic violence and power and control have a lot to do with each other. But when we just say that somebody who perpetrates violence has all of the power and control, and somebody who's a victim of violence has no power and control, we're really not looking at the dynamics correctly, and we're really not understanding what is made up in abusive situations. And so it's much more important that we break it down and we look at it, but also remind people that we always within us have power and we always within us have control. And we can always work to balance those. And yes, are there situations in life where I feel like I can't use my power because I might experience harm? I mean, I think that we're experiencing a lot of that in our community right now. Um, but that does not mean that I have lost my power. So it's just important to kind of think about it that way. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to talk a little bit about perpetrators and talk a little bit about victims. All right. So people who perpetrate violence. Um, some of the ways that we see people who perpetrate violence, they have likely suffered a particularly powerful disruption in their sense of their world. Um, or another way that we can look at it, they've likely experienced some type of a trauma, whether that's a big trauma like abuse themselves or something that really disrupted their sense of safety. It can be small trauma, which might be the loss of a family structure, like losing a parent, or uh, moving to a new community. And, whether that trauma is big or little, they've experienced a disruption in their sense of the world. And they no longer see it as a positive or supportive environment. There's a couple of things that we look at or look for. One, they do not acknowledge the boundaries or limits of others. So we just talked about that when we were talking about power and control. People who perpetrate violence tend to have a hard time acknowledging the boundaries of others. And they tend to take a stance where they need to get the world before they get me. So I am not the problem. Other people are the problem. And before I'm going to let somebody else hurt me again, I'm going to get them. People who perpetrate violence or use abuse, use violence, tend to be overpowered. So on our continuum, they tend to be heavy on the power end and they tend to be low on the control end. They tend to not have the ability to recognize the control that they have. Or, yeah. Um, all right. Victims. So people that tend to experience victim or tend to experience abuse likely have suffered a particularly powerful disruption in their sense of their self. Again, some form of trauma. Um, and that incident has superseded an act of their personal boundaries. So their boundaries have been blown over. A lot of times victims believe that they are the problem, so believe that they have done something to cause um, whatever happened in their life or is the one responsible for the abuse. If they had just done something different, it wouldn't have happened. And they often feel pressure to be over controlled and tend to be underpowered. So, a lot of times when I'm working with people who have experienced violence, they tend to have pretty thick walls set up. It's hard to get in there to provide information that might influence them. So they tend to be high on the control and they tend to feel underpowered. So they tend to not feel like they have much of an impact in the world. So that's why a lot of times when we're working with people, we are working on empowerment. Um, it's important that we recognize that victims are not responsible for the abuse that they've experienced. So even though they feel like they tend to be responsible for it, it's important that we recognize them as not being responsible, and help them learn how to stand up for themselves, set boundaries, um, and kind of make choices. So that's another thing that you'll hear from us is we don't make choices for people. We empower people to make their own choices.
And work to assist them in quelling their sense of feeling responsible for bringing on what's happened.
Ask your question again. I just want to make sure I understand it.
That's something that there is focus on helping these folks overcome a sense of being responsible for what has happened, uh, what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
There
Right.
is a structured approach to that.
I think it kind of varies from program to program and how much, not every program's going to dive necessarily into somebody's story. Of course, somebody who might be going through or visiting, working with a therapist,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes as we're doing safety planning and we're learning more about their abuse, I think there can be a lot of emphasis focused on um, kind of reinforcing that what happened to them is not their fault. Um, that it wouldn't have mattered if you had dinner on the table at 5 or if it was at 6:30, that that they're never responsible for the things that
Certainly,
happen.
yeah, certainly dedicate time to to quell any sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
All right. Um, so the victim perpetrator interaction pattern, when power and control balances become distorted and is consistent, the result can develop into a pattern. When this misbalance occurs, what can happen is the perpetrator victim interaction pattern. And part of that experience is understanding that most perpetrators have been victims. So we talked a little bit about that in their definition that they've experienced some form of trauma. And victims also have the capacity to perpetrate. So really, people can really play both roles, whether it's within their relationship or in different relationships that they may have in their life. Um, a lot of times when I'm learning about trauma and the impact that trauma has on people, having that look at the world as being an unsafe place is not an uncommon feeling that people who've experienced trauma may have, as well as at times feeling like you're somewhat responsible for having caused things. Both of those viewpoints, as you look at the world, can be a common experience that people who've been impacted by trauma may have. So victims and perpetrators match at a point of their own emotional and psychological development. So they can kind of fit together, which is why a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Why do I keep attracting the same kind of person?" Because we tend to fit with people who have similar experiences. Sorry, you jumped ahead and I kept talking. Go ahead.
That was an accident.
All right. More questions. Any other questions? Because I know that was a lot of information um, to give you guys. A lot to think about. But one thing I want to say is the volunteer team has put together a lot of information for you guys that you can review. And there's more information on the ecological approach and working with people impacted by violence and power and control and how we look at victims and perpetrators in that information too. So if you're like me, I tend to be somebody who takes in information and thinks about it. Um, and I don't always kind of come up with questions right away, but that's another place that you can gather information in case that would be helpful.
So in the Google Drive is what you're referring to, Carla?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
All right. We're a third of the way through our training tonight. And we're going to wrap up this section on working with people who've been impacted by violence and start talking about safety planning.
So we're going to transition into safety planning now. And we kind of want, no matter what your position is, to be able to at least talk through the first step of safety planning, or at least point them into the right direction, or connect them with the right person. Um, and it's important to remember that safety planning is always ongoing. It's not a checklist, it's a conversation that adapts to each person's situation. Because
Brooklyn. We're gonna pause a second and take a poll and just get people's kind of get for us to get a feel as to how much experience they might already have with safety planning before you got on your roll. You guys wanna, how familiar are you with safety planning? Not at all, a little bit, somewhat familiar, or very familiar? Okay, that's a good span. Thank you. Go for it, Brooklyn.
I think I said what I was gonna say, so it's on you now.
All right. What is safety planning? Um, Safety planning is the reason why we spend a lot of time on it is one of the core services that we provide. Um, we can be specific to it can be specific to situations or more broadly applied to a person. And we'll talk a little bit more about the forms of safety. So what is it? Safety planning is the creation of action, strategies, resources to help us prevent unsafe situations or support someone during an unsafe situation. In addition to physical safety, safety plans can also be checking in on the emotional or well-being of a person.
Does does everybody everybody in the shelter, do they all have access to is everything accessible, or are there limitations, boundaries uh to to any services or anything of that type?
To like Tubman services,
Yeah, everybody is able to take part in all of these, in all planning. They can take advantage of all that's offered.
yep.
There aren't
Mhm.
any restrictions or limitations saying, okay, you can only take X amount of this, and there's no cap.
No, we usually try to provide them with the Tubman program guide so they can kind of see all the resources and program and services that Tubman offers, and that does get updated every 3 months. Right,
Hmm.
Carla?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And they can then, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Pardon my interruption.
No, you're fine. We can move to the next slide.
So jumping into the forms of safety. When we think about safety planning, it's important to remember that safety is much broader than just physical safety. Survivors often have needs in many areas of their lives, and we need to take a holistic approach. And again, this list isn't the full list, so if you think of other things, feel free to put it in the chat too. But just a couple um, examples is emotional, um, so having support, ways to cope, physical, safe housing, sexual, technology, immigration, so like your status, housing, keeping your housing, financial, economic, so having access to money, to work, getting to work, spiritual support. Some other areas that might come up could be parenting, child safety, legal safety. And every survivor is kind of going to define their own safety differently, because their emotional safety might be more important to them than their physical safety, or their immigration status might be more important than their housing. So everyone's going to kind of define their what's more important to them.
Do is there legal assistance provided through Tubman?
Yeah, so usually, if they identify that they have legal issues with their case managers, there
Hmm.
is a legal assessment that they can complete, and then that's scanned over to our legal department,
Hmm.
so that they can do a better assessment, and then a legal advocate would reach out to see, what they should work on first and how they can better assist them.
Hmm. Okay. So and okay. All right. Thank
Good,
you.
good questions. Yeah. I'm ready for the next slides. Great. Um, Now we're going to kind of jump into the safety planning pillars, and me and Carla will take turns going over them. The first one is person-centered. So basically, clients are the experts in their own life, so safety planning should always be led by them and person-centered, based on their own choices. Because again, they know what's their biggest safety concerns, and that might change based on what's going on in their situation. Um, Today it could be housing, tomorrow it could be their emotional well-being. So we always need to make sure that we're listening to the client and that it's person-centered and that we are there to listen, and they're leading their own safety planning. We're kind of just there to help them, to guide them.
The next pillar is strength-based. As advocates, we want to focus on a client's strengths rather than really focusing on the distress of a situation. Learning or leaning into somebody's strengths that they already have is really important. Even though they may not be able to name them as they're talking about their story, it's important that we're listening for the strengths that they present. Victim survivors are some of the strongest people, most resilient, smart, intuitive, because of all of the things that they've experienced. So when we lean into that strength and the skills that they have, that they've developed over time, it will just make for a stronger safety plan. It's important to remember that this is not the start always of somebody's safety plan because they've already done so much just to end up talking to us. So if we sometimes don't know where to start by highlighting somebody's strength, we can start there by saying, "You've already done so much." It took a lot of courage to get here. It took a lot of courage to pick up the phone.
And thank you all.
The next one is holistic. As we just talked about with the forms of safety, we need to look at the full picture. Safety planning isn't about just immediate danger, it's also about long-term well-being. So that even can be like self-care. Kind of like an example I like to use is like people sometimes will say like, "Oh, everything's good in my life. Like I don't need to go to therapy," but like it's still how can we maintain that, what can you continue to do to maintain being safe, to maintain that positive outlook, and so it's good to always still be planning and safety planning and just looking at the whole picture.
The next pillar is intuitive. So victim survivors are pretty intuitive, and it's important that we play on that. It needs to make sense to them. They're the ones that are going to have to follow it. And also needs to be trauma informed. So when you are in a safety situation and you go into fight or flight, and you're not necessarily able to think and to problem solve, it's important that your safety plan is something that's easy to follow when you're in the survival mode. So it needs to be easy to remember. It needs to be things that they might do naturally, not something that we might do naturally. And having a plan that reflects that is sometimes the important or the difference between it being successful or not successful.
The next one is fluid and adaptable. So not one size fits all, and what keeps someone safe today may not work tomorrow. As their situation and resources change, that's why plans should be reviewed and revisit regularly. So, for example, someone could be taking the bus to work, but then they find out that their abuser knows the bus route that they take. So then we revisit different bus routes that they could take to work or different transportation that they could take to work. So it's always good to make sure that we're revisiting things as new concerns come up.
And a good safety plan addresses both short-term and long-term needs. Um, and this doesn't need to be necessarily a conversation that we have just once. We might have the opportunity to have multiple conversations with somebody. If we know that we're just going to have one conversation, we need to focus on the immediate or short-term needs. Um, and not necessarily on the big picture, not necessarily on the long-term needs. But if we know that we're going to have the opportunity to have multiple conversations with somebody, it's good to make sure that we're focusing both on what is essential right now and what they might want to focus on in the future. All right, safety planning process. Um, It's rarely a standalone service. Most of the time, it's woven into all of the services that we do. And it's not necessarily something that we're just setting up a one-time appointment to have a safety plan conversation. It's something that we want to be providing throughout the time that we're working with somebody. It might be initially getting a really in-depth idea of what they're going through and then touching base on safety kind of as we've worked with them. I know for myself in my experience that asking somebody if they want to work on a safety plan isn't necessarily the most successful way to have the conversation. But instead, I just spend time being curious about what their experiences have been, what that they're most concerned about, and just having a conversation that develops naturally. Um, Also, it's important that if they're fearful and they have some concerns, that that's where they start with the plan and not necessarily what we think should be first or foremost important. Um, so we ask them what they're concerned about, what's their biggest priority. We ask open-ended questions. Sometimes that uncovers new information or someplace new that we can work from. Thinking about your safety, how has it felt since? So, like, I work a lot with people moving into new housing. So, I might ask, when you think about your safety now, how have you felt since you've moved into your new apartment? And that might give me a good starting point of having a new conversation. Staying true to the values of the pillars, we want to make sure that we're incorporating strength base. So, validating their strengths and their resiliency. Survival is already a strength that they have and something that they might not necessarily realize. Learn more about what they want to learn more about. They've already had the opportunity to share so much. So, what is it that they might also want to learn? Learn how to build more support options. We have obviously many services at Tubman that people are always able to access, but what are the services within the community? Are there cultural considerations that we need to look into? Have they moved to a new community and need to learn what resources are around them? Who are the safe people in their life that they can build on? And that might be like friends or family, it might be coworkers, it might be spiritual leaders. Connection to other people is a huge way that people can um, get out of the isolation and build a new community. It's important that we provide options, not opinions. It's common for us to want to be able to give people advice, but we need to make sure that we're providing options and letting people choose what direction they want to go in. We need to remember that this is the survivor's plan and not our plan. We don't consider ourselves fixers or rescuers. We're people that work alongside of them um, to be able to come up with their own decisions and conclusions about what will keep them safe. And when exploring options, consider the consequences. A lot of times we tend to lean towards thinking that somebody leaving an abusive relationship is going to be the most safe thing for them to do, or getting an order for protection will be the thing that will keep them safe. But it's important that remember that with every decision, there is a reaction, and those things may not always be the safest thing for somebody to do. So it's important that we provide them information and let them choose because they're the experts in their relationships. So, safety plan tips and tricks. Um, so, one of the things that I like to think about is that they have a lot of information about what they've done in the past and what has worked and not worked. And part of my role is to help come up with new ideas and maybe things that they haven't thought of before. Um, it's important that um, we think about different things that they might need to bring with them, or places that they can go, or who they can call for help. We've already spent a little bit of time tonight talking about pets. So it might be thinking about if you have a pet, what do we need to make sure we bring? What what kind of food? Is there information that we need about the tracking chip that maybe a pet has, or contacting the vet? So different kind of things like that to think about. Um, and then accountability and code words. Sometimes that's something that we'll talk about with people is making sure that other people know what's going on. Maybe you have a code word, I could call my sister, and if I use the code word, then she knows that I'm not safe and she maybe needs to call 911. And then documentation, making sure that you're keeping track of things that have happened. Maybe you have a journal or a notebook that you can write down when something's happened, who maybe witnessed it, what's the date, what's the time of day, so that if you need that information, you have it already kept track of.
So now that we talked about safety planning, we're gonna watch a short little clip of what safety planning can look like too.
Hello, Tubman Crisis Line. How may I help you?
Hi, I don't really know what to say. A friend of mine gave me your number and she said you might be able to help me. I've been in a relationship with my children's father for a while now and things haven't always been great, but they've gotten a lot worse recently. I've been thinking a lot about leaving him. I'm scared, but I also know that it's the right thing to do for me and my kids. I just need help.
Okay, okay. First, are you in a safe place to talk?
I'm on my break from work right now.
Okay, perfect, perfect, good. Well, it does take a lot of courage to call and reach out for support, so thank you for that. Um, what are you really concerned about right now? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, so I guess I'm worried about leaving. So if I leave, he's gonna be upset. And I also really, really hate to take his kids away from him. But I also know it's not a safe place for me to be, and I don't want my kids to think it's okay to be treated like this.
I know, sounds like you really, really love your kids a lot, and this is not an easy decision, but you also deserve to be safe at all times. Can we talk about some ways to stay safe in this situation?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So when you're thinking about leaving, do you have a safe place to go, or are you concerned he'll find you if you leave?
Yeah, so I do have a friend who offered me like her place to stay, and he knows where I am, but I'm not sure if he would go there if I'm with this friend. He might come to my job, but my supervisor knows, she knows what's going on and is really supportive.
Okay, good, good. Well, I'm glad you have support. That's really important. If you go to this friend's house, are your kids able to come with you?
Yeah, she said they're welcome.
Great, 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 great. That is absolutely great. It's also helpful if you have a plan when you're leaving. Can we talk about a few ideas first?
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Is there a time of day when he's gone or at work or a time when he's not around that kind of best for you and him?
Yeah, so I've thought about it a little bit. So he works during the day, so I can plan to leave while he's at work. And because I told my supervisor about it, I know that she'd give me the day off.
Okay, good. That's really good to hear. Okay, well, next, let's talk about a few things throughout this whole process. Some of the things that you should bring with you. You want to make sure you have cash. Make sure you have a full tank of gas, any medications, of course, your driver's license, anything that's important um, for yourself and for your kids. I would take things slowly. Don't move everything out at once because that can kind of cause some commotion if he sees that you're trying to flee or if you're trying to move out right away. So just take things little by little and then, have a date in place to be completely gone. Um,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I've already started to pack a few things, but I haven't like really moved anything. So I think I'm just gonna bring a few items to start to my friend's house. And I haven't decided when I'm gonna leave, so I just need to start taking a few steps.
Okay, well, it sounds like you already have a plan, and the steps that you're planning to take are really good. You just want to stay discreet and, not let them know or anyone know that, that you're leaving. It's always safe to kind of keep things quiet and to yourself. Always stay in touch with your friend throughout this whole process. I would have like a safe word. So when you're communicating with her, if things don't go right or if find some information, you can use that safe word between your friend and yourself to kind of plan that if anything goes wrong, she'll know to either send help or she'll be able to come help you.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a really good idea.
Great. Have you considered about taking any legal steps like order of protection or anything?
No, not yet, but I think I should look into it. I've been thinking about it. Do you guys help with that too?
Yes, we do. I can connect you with our legal department. And if you have any questions or wanted to talk to someone, I can give you that number. And you can call whenever you want, or, you feel free to have some time and find more information.
Yeah, thank you. I actually really would like to talk to somebody about that. And yeah, I feel a lot more hopeful after talking to you. So thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. I can transfer you over to our legal department. Is there anything else I can help you with before I leave?
No, this is a lot of really good information. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, you can always call back. We are a 24-hour crisis line, so feel free to call back if you have any questions or concerns or just need someone to talk to, okay?
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
So, what stood out to you? What what are your thoughts? What are your reactions?
It was a maybe not civil, but it was a I don't know, socially collectible conversation. Two got a it was I think the two it was comfortable, which is important.
Thank you. I see some comments in the chat. Um, Not overwhelming the caller, being patient, asking questions, guiding her to give information, very compassionate. Um, Focus on the steps in the plan, recognizing the courage that it took to call, made sure that they were in a safe place, kind and affirming. So some of the pillars that we talked about a little bit earlier with being client-centered and strength-based, um, yep, giving suggestions instead of directions. Yep, absolutely. Really good kind of things to highlight as far as what was discussed. Thank you. Anything else that you would throw in there, Brooklyn? All right. Well, I know on our slides, are we going to throw that resource page back up there? Awesome. So some of the resources, day one, which Brooklyn talked about, um, when talking about the shelter, Tubman's helpline, but then some common resources that we use nationally and locally within our communities that are good. Um, National Network to End Domestic Violence is one I commonly use when addressing financial abuse and learning more about financial abuse. They have lots of great resources there. Any last questions before we kind of wrap up this training for the evening? I know some of you have a little more to do, but a great opportunity to ask any last questions you might be hanging on to. Otherwise, I would say both Brooklyn and I are definitely open to being contacted if you have additional questions as you move through the training series or think of things that you've forgot to ask. You're absolutely welcome to do that as well.
All right. I'm going to just turn off the recording and excuse me.